Good morning. I'm just going to continue my series on Bobby Fischer and the 1963-64 American Championships. This is round 9, and Bobby Fischer was black, playing against Donald Byrne. And excuse me, I think it's worth remembering that just 5-6 years before, Bobby Fischer had played the so-called game of the century against Donald Byrne, an absolutely fantastic game. A huge long sacrificial combination which 13, 14-year-old Fischer stunned the international master Byrne with. And so he knew what a dangerous opponent he was playing, particularly an opponent who could be dangerous with the black pieces. And for that reason, Byrne chose to go to attack against Fischer from early on, and he made it into a tough and exciting fight. Let's just see what happens here. So Byrne plays g3, looking to fear and castle his bishop, and Fischer takes that as an invitation to play the Sicilian. This is the Sicilian invitation, and Byrne's willing to go along with that, and he plays the bishop. Fischer develops the knight. It isn't a good idea to take the knight straight away and leave this hole in your position, and you don't really gain anything from it. So he doesn't do that, of course. He looks to support his pawn on e4. I know, can you say there isn't a pawn on e4? There will be, trust me. Or at least that's part of his plan. So Fischer goes for a fianchetto as well, and the pawn does indeed come to d4, e4, the Lasker Dunn attack. Bishop develops to g7, f4. Now this is a bold move. I think we could probably say it is a bit too bold. But yeah, he's not making it easy for Fischer to just mow him down and win the game. He's giving him a fight. All right. He creates some weaknesses in his own camp, and those weaknesses eventually are part of the reason he loses. But I think we can see already as well, this move draws the lines. White is going to attack on the king side, so black is almost forced to attack on the queen side. It's there he has most space, it's there he has most opportunities. So the pawn comes to e6. He doesn't want the pawn coming to f5. And the knight develops, and the knight develops, and white castles, and black plays rook to b8. Instead of just routinely castling, he plays rook to b8 to support b5, so that he doesn't have to play a6 first. Now he plays d6 to release his bishop and his queen. So a4 is to restrain the b5 move, and black castles. Yeah, I'm not really sure why he's playing c3 there, maybe to allow his queen access to the queen side, I don't know. So now Byrne has forced Fischer to play a6, but he doesn't mind. So expansion on the king side from white, and expansion on the queen side from black. A very typical King's Indian formation attack idea. I know it says Sicilian defence, but we can treat this as more like being a King's Indian formation attack, a favourite of Fischer's actually. And it's almost as if he's playing against a King's Indian. It's not a King's Indian because the pawn hasn't come to d4, but it's almost a King's Indian attack against a King's Indian defence. It's the pawn's taken, and the pawn's taken. And the knight comes to h4 to clear the way for the queen, for the knight, and to support the pawn coming to f5. So it's supported with the rook. Fischer carries on with his attack, and Byrne goes past. When he goes past, this gives up the square d4 to the knight. It becomes an important square. And Byrne carries on with his attack, looking eventually to play f5 and break things open. So Fischer develops his last minor piece, and Byrne challenges the knight on d4. Fischer's finished with development. Byrne just needs to move his bishop and his queen, and he's finished with development. So the knight is taken, and he plays check with the bishop, and the king moves also the way, and the bishop goes all the way back. It doesn't want to be hanging about where it might be subject to attack later on, for example, from knight f3. So he retreats all the way back. Best square for the knight, for the bishop even. Yes, king to b, rook to b1. It's support this pawn when it comes to b3. Yeah, to give room for the bishop to move. I'm not quite sure why he plays rook to b1. And as soon as he concedes the open file, Fischer takes it. And he's not going to give it up under any circumstances. So he tries to take control over the important d4 square. And the rook comes to a2. Is he looking at doubling? Is he looking at putting the queen in on the a file? We'll have to see. Queen defends the pawn on b2. Double defends the pawn on b2. And the rook comes to e8. This is so that the knight can move and have more defense on the open e line. Or I know it's not very open at the minute, but white has ambitions to attack on the e file. Yeah, maybe he's thinking he can play d4 and do some trading in the middle and end up with his queen in a powerful position. Bishop comes to c6. This probably encourages the idea of d4 because now the d5 is a real threat. But he takes on d4 and the bishop takes. And Fischer takes back. He doesn't mind giving up his fianchettled bishop because he knows it makes his bishop even more powerful. I just, you know, just pause a minute and see how bishop a8 becomes a developing move. How is it a developing move? Because it opens up the squares g7, b7 and c6 for the queen, and it opens up the square c6 for the knight, and the bishop is as powerful there as it was on c6. So, wonderful developing move, developing by moving his bishop backwards. You know, just take a moment and admire that cleverness by Fischer. So Byrne wants to swap off, and Fischer attacks the queen and says, well, not yet. If we're going to swap off, we're going to swap off on my terms. And the queen retreats, and now he swaps. And he takes the pawn. And he has to stop this pawn from coming forward. He can collect this pawn later, is his thinking. And he's right. And indeed he collects the pawn. But now the knight comes again and uses the powerful d4 square, this time to attack the pawn on b3. But also e2 could be a powerful square for the knight. c2 could be a powerful square for the knight. You know, and it's very, very difficult without the dark square bishop for white to chase that knight away. He can't immediately come to f3 with the knight to chase it away because the pawn on b3 then falls. He has to defend the b3 pawn first. Wait a minute, doesn't this give Fischer a fork? It does give a fork, but he's got a tactical way of getting out of it. And the queens are swapped off, and the king is out of the rook and queen are out of the fork. But the knight again comes to the d4 square, and now it's impossible for Fischer to defend the pawn on b3. So he attacks the pawn on d6 instead. So exchange of prisoners. Knight comes to c5, and now he's got 3 pawns, 3 attackers on this piece. So, and a pass pawn, which is going to be stopped. And the pass pawn gets pushed. Of course, pass pawn should be pushed. And now he takes on d4, e4 even. Yeah, he's willing to swap off the bishops, and from e4 it supports the knight, the rook, pawn, queening square. So, you know, something has to be done about that. But he blocks the knight rather than blocks with the knight rather than let the bishop be taken on e2. But it's more or less all over now. He gets to the open file and he's going to get a check here, which will prove to be fatal. Oh, wait a minute, he threatens the knight and he's still threatening the pawn. You know, does this work for Fischer? It works perfectly. He pushes the pawn. It's got to be taken, and I hope we can all see the finish. Rook a1 check. Forces the king to f2. d3 forks. And he wins the rook for the bishop on e4. And he gets a pawn. So now he has an exchange and a pawn. The bishop is attacked, defended by the king. The knight comes to attack the bishop once more, and the bishop goes to h3. But he changed his mind and resigned here. Byrne, you know, it's not going to end well for him. For instance, Fischer can play king to g7, push the pawn. You know, the knight's stuck here to defend this. You know, he really has very few sensible moves, and Fischer has many ways to advance. In other words, play king here and then pawn here to win this pawn and have two pass pawns. Have a pass pawn on the f file. It's probably better than getting rid of the f pawn and not having a pass pawn. But both would be winning, and I think Byrne saw that Fischer had many ways to win this and he had nothing to do. But 46 moves, he's put up a better fight than many did, and at least he went on the attack from early on in the game. He didn't just meekly give up. But the result was the same as all the other results have been in this 63-64 US Championship. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share on my videos. Thanks. Bye.